A new era of filmmaking has just arrived for the low price of $10,000. But still, the Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro 12K was just announced on an adorable little live stream, and it is blowing my mind with the promises of 12K resolution and 4K at 220 frames per second. But honestly, why would you need all that resolution and all of those frames? And what other secrets is the camera holding? Well, to find out, why don't you hit that like, smash that subscribe, and stay tuned. The Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro 12K was just announced and has some crazy resolutions and frame rates. At its full sensor size of 35mm, it can do 12K at 60 frames per second and 4K and 8K at 110 frames per second. And if you crop down to CinemaScope or 2x4x1, you can get 8K at 140 frames per second and 4K at 140 frames per second. But here's the kicker. If you crop down the sensor to Super 16mm, you get 6K at 120 frames per second and 4K at 220 frames per second. Gemini Man wouldn't even know what to do with all those frames. You okay there?
Oh my god. We've been searching anything 4K that can go at least close to 120, and here it is. This is it. This could be it.
Just for $10,000. So I know that might have sounded like a bunch of gibberish, but for those who don't know, most things today are presented in 720p or 1080p, which are considered full HD resolution. But in 2012, a new standard was made, which is 4K resolution, which is 4 times the pixels of 1080p. What do you even do with that kind of resolution? Well, what you can do is digitally zoom 200% into 4K and still match the pixel resolution of 1080p. And for reference, you might be wondering why I got 200% zoom in or 2 times zoom from 4 times the pixel density. Well, the math you gotta do is just the larger amount of pixels divided by the lower amount of pixels and then square root that number. That gets you how much you can zoom in from the first pixel ratio to the second pixel ratio. And I know your eyes just glazed over, don't worry, we're not doing any more math. So all of that was just to tell you that for 6K, you have 2.5 times the pixels of 4K, and you can zoom in 150 times. For 8K, you have 4 times the pixels of 4K, so that means you can zoom in 200%. So for 12K, that has 9.6 times the pixels of 4K, which means that you can zoom in 309.9% on that image and still have 4K resolution.
Okay, Mike?
Sorry, I just remembered college calculus.
Okay, it's 12K, it's okay, just have a... It's okay.
Thank you. And all that resolution can be really useful if your image is weirdly framed, or you find out that the image is slanted a little bit, so in post you can zoom in and then correct that rotation. But honestly, that's really useful for visual effects artists, who need as many pixels as they can to make sure that they can get really good motion tracking done, and potentially project some of the images back onto a geometry. I don't know if you would know it, I've been doing too much in Blender. But really, if you're making content online, most of your footage is going to be viewed on a 1080p or a 2K monitor. And even then, sometimes YouTube will compress your video a bunch. I'm not salty. And even some Hollywood directors like David F. Sandberg have said that they don't even notice sometimes when they push in post on a 2K or a 1080p image. On the big screen, sometimes it looks just fine. So don't feel bad if you have to zoom in or scale up your image, especially on 12K. But really, just frame your... Alan's gonna beat me up if I don't tell you. Just frame your thing right and make sure it looks nice. Because honestly, if you take a 12K, 8K, 6K, or 4K image, and then you render that as 1080p, you'll find that it looks far more clean and crisp than if you upscaled it. A hard and fast rule is that if you're compressing pixels down, it's gonna look cleaner, but if you're expanding pixels out, it's gonna look a little blurry and gross. Whew. Well, with all that radical math out of the way, you might be wondering, hey, what if I don't want to zoom into my image? Well, if you don't want 12K, this camera can also do higher frame rates. And if you watched our Gemini Man video, you know that higher frame rates means that you can do slow motion in post. So usually, to get a higher frame rate, your camera needs to read the sensor quicker. And to make sure that the camera doesn't explode, manufacturers usually just crop down how much of the sensor that's being used. But unfortunately, that has the effect of cropping in the image and making a more narrow frame. So you don't get as wide of a view and you don't get to see everything that you bought your lens for. But this monster can do 12K at 60 frames per second, or 4K at 110 frames per second with no crop. So instead of cropping the sensor, they're actually scaling the pixels. I don't even know how the guy just kind of said it like in an offhand. He's like, oh, we're doing a weird scaling, but that is like new technology I don't even know about. And if they do crop the sensor to 16 millimeters instead of 35 millimeters, you get 4K at 220 frames per second. That means that you can slow down that footage by 9 times and basically get 24 frames per second. And you might not have noticed that I said 4K at 220 frames per second. So you can slow it down by 9 times and still zoom in by 2 times. But I don't want to get too deep into this. For more on that, go check out the Gemini Man video. Alan doesn't like it. I still like it.
Listen, I screwed it up.
It's fine.
It looks awful.
It's just the lighting, you know, your job. Whew. And all of that finally brings me down to usability. You get all of those frames and all that resolution, but that's gonna fill up your hard drive real quick. But luckily, the Ursa Mini Pro 12K can apparently write to 2 cards at the exact same time. So if you have 2 CFast cards inside the camera, it will write to both of them, sending each of them a frame. So if you lose one of the cards, you still have half of the frames on the other card. So if you're shooting at 12K at 60 frames per second, lose one of the cards, the other card is gonna have 12K at 30 frames per second? Apparently that's how that works.
Really?
Yeah, like legitimately. That's how
Is
the
that
guy
what
described. He described it like that. Not the 12K 30 frames.
Yeah.
But he basically said, yeah, you'll just have half the frames.
Oh man. Okay.
Isn't that crazy?
I don't know how would you edit that?
So if you take both of the cards and then put both of the information in the same folder, it'll just treat it like it's the same video.
Huh.
It's crazy. And all of that organization happens in DaVinci Resolve, and apparently DaVinci Resolve can handle 12K raw footage on a MacBook Pro. The dude just unplugged the hard drive and plugged it right into the MacBook Pro, and it read it just fine. But really, this is going to be like a new version of DaVinci Resolve that is better suited for 12K, which you can download the beta right now, as well as some raw 12K footage on their website. We'll have a link in the description. And he even went on to plug that same hard drive into a big old mac cheese grater. Mac and cheese grater! I literally just thought that. And even took that same hard drive, plugged it into one of those big Mac cheese graters, and copied the file 9 times, and he showed how one of those computers can handle 9 different tracks of 12K footage, which is insane to me. I don't even know how we've gotten here.
Yeah, that's a little bonkers. That's a little too crazy.
And on that note, the camera isn't immediately going to be available for us to purchase. They're going to send it to DIT people first and see if they can even use it. Grant even mentioned that the camera is suited more for production than for broadcast. But really, this camera is a VFX artist and a slow motion videographer's dream, which is me. It's me right here. I want it. Give it to me. But I really recommend watching the full stream. They actually have a couple of other products that are pretty cool looking, like a little mini monitor that has SDI in and out, HDMI in and out, XLR in and out, and can record to 2 SD cards. It's pretty good. They talk a little bit more about the colors and skin tones that the camera gets, as well as the 14 stops of dynamic range. It's really worth a watch. And actually, for more about that and a cinematographer's perspective of this camera and what we're still waiting on, let's get Alan in here. Come on in, pal. Hurry up.
All right, everyone. So real quick, I'm just gonna give like 2 seconds or so worth of input here, okay? Brand new camera comes out, all this amazing thing. Everybody wants to pre-order it and whatnot. A couple of things that we don't know yet, or I don't know just yet, is well, we don't know what this new type of RAW can do. Same thing with the dynamic range. Sure, 12K is great. What?
He's got 14 stops.
Whoa! Never mind, okay. So yeah, even with this brand new 12K sensor and the fact that it has 14 stops of dynamic range, it doesn't mean that you get to cheat your way out of lighting a scene properly. Just because this brand new camera can fix a lot of your old problems, it doesn't mean that it should. Get it good on camera first, and well, post can deal with everything else later. I'm just looking forward to color grading this thing. Just all those pixels need to be touched. So that was Alan's 2 cents.
Thanks, Alan. That meant nothing. So, what did you think of the Ursa 4K?
I love it.
But what do you think? Are you going to get the Ursa Mini Pro 12K with its 12K and 4K 220 frames per second? I don't even know what I would do with all that, but I'm willing to find out. Let us know in the comments below. And Alan and I are trying to do something new by answering questions that you guys have for us. So in the comments below, leave any question you have for Alan or I, and we'll try to answer it in the next episode. And if you like this video, please give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike, and consider subscribing for more videos like this. And hit the bell icon. I realize a bunch of you aren't getting our notifications, and some of my friends have been telling me, so hit that bell, and you'll be notified of our next video. Okay, bye.
Jesus Christ, are you alright?
I haven't done that much math in a long time, dude. My brain is basically a hard-boiled egg.